The transport shuttle's engines hummed with a deep vibration that Sarah Chen had grown to hate over the past 6 months. She pressed her face against the small porthole, watching the alien landscape of Kepler 442b stretch endlessly below. Red sand dunes rolled like frozen waves under twin purple suns, broken only by the occasional metallic gleam of mining equipment or the geometric patterns of galactic military installations. Sarah pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders. The fabric was faded now, the original blue barely visible, but she could still make out the NASA patch on her left arm. It felt like a reminder of a life that belonged to someone else, someone who had been excited about humanity's first deep space archaeological mission, someone who believed that studying ancient alien civilizations would bridge gaps between species. That person had died 6 months ago along with the rest of her team. The shuttle lurched slightly as it began its descent toward Mining Station Echo 7. Sarah's stomach twisted, but not from the motion. She had learned to live with the constant ache of isolation, the weight of being the only human in this sector of space. The Galactic Federation had been clear about her status. She was a temporary researcher on extended assignment, her passage home dependent on completing her contracted work. What they hadn't mentioned was that her work involved cataloging artifacts that the military routinely destroyed or sold off before she could properly study them. Through the porthole, she could see the landing platform approaching. Figures moved around in the typical chaos of a busy spaceport, but Sarah had learned to identify the different species from a distance. The tall, spindly Vorthan with their silver skin gleamed in the sunlight as they directed cargo operations. Squat, rocky-skinned Gornians operated the heavy machinery with their 4 powerful arms. The graceful Etherian diplomats glided between groups, their translucent blue forms shimmering like water. And, then, there were the soldiers. The Galactic Federation military drew from dozens of species, but they all shared the same arrogant swagger, the same dismissive glances toward anything they considered primitive. Sarah had endured 6 months of their casual cruelty, their jokes about the pet human, their constant reminders that Earth was barely considered worthy of membership in galactic society. The shuttle touched down with a jarring thud that rattled Sarah's teeth. She gathered her few belongings, a battered tablet, a worn backpack containing her personal items, and a small metal case holding the only artifact she had managed to hide from the military's attention. The case felt heavier than it should, weighted with the knowledge that these might be the last remnants of a billion-year-old civilization that had once called this world home. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Sarah stepped onto the platform and immediately felt the familiar sting of alien air against her skin. The atmosphere was breathable for humans, but it carried a metallic taste that never quite went away and a smell like ozone and burning sand. Dr. Chen. The voice belonged to Commander Vexstar, a Vorthan officer who served as the station's military liaison. His silver skin caught the light as he approached, his 2 long limbs moving with predatory grace. Welcome back to Echo 7. I trust your survey of the southern ruins was productive? Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze. Vorthan eyes were completely black, like looking into deep space, and they missed nothing. I found several interesting samples. The preliminary analysis suggests yes, I'm sure it's all very fascinating. Vexstar waved a dismissive hand. The important question is whether you found anything of military value. Weapons technology, defensive systems, anything that might be useful to the Federation. The civilization that built those ruins was peaceful, Sarah said carefully. Their technology focused on art, agriculture, and astronomy. Nothing that would interest the military. It was a lie. The artifacts in her case contained technological principles that could revolutionize energy production and space travel. But Sarah had learned the hard way what happened when the military found something useful. The last archaeological site she'd studied had been strip-mined within a week of her reporting unusual energy readings. Vexstar's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the slight narrowing of his eyes. How disappointing. Well, perhaps the next site will prove more fruitful. Report to Dr. Kethral in the morning. She has a new assignment for you. Sarah nodded and turned to leave, but Vexstar's voice stopped her. Oh, and, Dr. Chen? I should mention that we're expecting some new arrivals tomorrow. A delegation from the hegemony of Zor is coming to inspect our operations. I trust you'll remember your place during their visit. The threat was subtle but clear. Sarah had seen what happened to species that embarrassed the Federation in front of important allies. She forced herself to nod again. Of course, Commander. She made her way through the station's corridors, past the usual mix of miners, traders, and soldiers. Echo 7 was built into the side of a massive canyon, its metal corridors carved directly into the red stone. The architecture was purely functional, no attempt at beauty or comfort, just efficient use of space and resources. It reminded Sarah of a prison. Her quarters were located in what the station's designers generously called the residential sector, though it was really just a cluster of converted storage compartments near the mining equipment. The constant noise of machinery made sleep difficult, but Sarah had learned to find comfort in the rhythmic sounds. They reminded her that she was still alive, still breathing, still fighting to preserve something meaningful in a galaxy that seemed determined to destroy everything in its path to profit. She sealed the door behind her and activated the privacy screen, one of the few perks of her scientific status. The small room felt like a cave carved from metal and stone. A narrow bed, a basic desk, and a tiny hygiene alcove made up the entire living space. But it was hers, and it was the only place in this corner of space where she could let her guard down. Sarah set the artifact case on her desk and opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, nestled in protective foam, were three objects that represented the culmination of 6 months of careful theft and deception. A crystalline data storage device that contained the complete history of the ancient civilization. A small metal sphere that generated clean energy through principles that human science couldn't explain. And, most precious of all, a communication device that had once connected peaceful worlds across this entire star system. She had been studying the civilization that built these artifacts for months, piecing together their story from fragments and ruins. They called themselves the Shatari, and they had created a society based on cooperation rather than conquest. For over 1,000,000 years, they had lived in harmony with their environment and, with other species, developing technology that enhanced life rather than destroying it. Then, the first galactic empire had arrived, driven by the same hunger for resources and control that still motivated the Federation today. The Shatari had tried to negotiate, to share their knowledge freely in exchange for peace. In response, the Empire had enslaved them, strip-mined their worlds, and eventually driven them to extinction. History repeating itself, Sarah thought bitterly. The Federation dressed it up in prettier language now, talked about development and mutual benefit, but the end result was the same. Advanced civilizations conquered primitive ones, took what they wanted, and discarded the rest. But the Shatari had been clever. They had hidden caches of their technology across dozens of worlds, buried deep enough to survive the initial wave of destruction. They had hoped that someday, a species might come along that was different, that was willing to learn rather than simply take. Sarah touched the communication device gently. According to her translations, it could reach across interstellar distances, connecting anyone who shared the Shatari's values of peace and cooperation. She had been afraid to activate it, afraid of who might answer, but, as the weeks passed and her isolation grew heavier, the temptation became harder to resist. A soft chime from her door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah quickly closed the case and slid it under her bed before checking the visitor display. A young Etherean stood in the corridor, her translucent form shifting between blue and purple with what Sarah had learned to recognize as nervousness. Sarah opened the door. "Zara? What are you doing here so late?" Zara Valfani was one of the few beings on the station who had shown Sarah any kindness. As a junior diplomat, she had no real power, but she had gone out of her way to help Sarah navigate Federation bureaucracy and had even shared meals when the isolation became overwhelming. "I wanted to warn you," Zara said, her voice carrying the melodic quality of her species. "The delegation that's coming tomorrow, they're not just here for an inspection." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. "What do you mean?" "I overheard Commander Vexstar talking to his superiors. The hegemony has been pressuring the Federation to demonstrate human loyalty. They want proof that Earth species can be trusted with sensitive information. And if I fail this test?" Zara's form flickered red with distress. "They're talking about relocating you to a mining world. Permanent assignment. No chance of return to Earth." Sarah sank onto her bed, the weight of 6 months of barely controlled desperation finally threatening to crush her. "How am I supposed to prove loyalty to people who see me as barely sentient?" "I don't know," Zara admitted. "But I thought you should be prepared." After Zara left, Sarah sat in the darkness of her quarters, staring at the walls that had become her world. Outside, she could hear the distant sounds of the station's night shift, the clank of mining equipment, the hum of air recyclers, the occasional burst of alien laughter from the recreation areas. She thought about her team, about the excitement they had all shared when they had been selected for humanity's first deep space mission. Dr. Martinez had joked that they were going to be the Lewis and Clark of the space age. Professor Kim had spent hours planning how they would document everything they found, how they would share it with universities back on Earth. None of them had expected to be separated the moment they arrived in Federation space. None of them had known that the scientific exchange was really just a cover for cheap labor. Sarah didn't even know if the others were still alive, scattered across different mining stations and research facilities throughout Federation territory. She pulled out her tablet and called up the message she had been composing for weeks, a report about her real findings, addressed to the Xenoarchaeology Department at Earth's United Nations headquarters. She had never sent it because Federation monitoring systems scanned all outgoing communications. But maybe it was time to stop playing by their rules. The report contained everything she had learned about the Shatari, complete with detailed scans of the artifacts she had hidden. More importantly, it contained her analysis of Federation expansion patterns, documenting how they systematically destroyed archaeological sites and suppressed evidence of peaceful civilizations. If humanity was going to survive contact with the galactic community, they needed to know what they were really dealing with. Sarah's finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Transmitting this would be treason by Federation law. It would certainly mean imprisonment, possibly execution. But staying silent meant watching as humanity was slowly absorbed into the same system that had destroyed countless others. The decision was made for her when her door chimed again. This time, the visitor display showed Commander Vextar flanked by 2 armed guards. Sarah quickly closed the tablet and shoved it under her pillow before opening the door. "Commander? Is something wrong?" Vextar's black eyes seemed to gleam in the corridor lighting. "Dr. Chen, we need to discuss your upcoming evaluation." "May we come in?" It wasn't really a question. Sarah stepped aside as the 3 aliens entered her small quarters. The guards, both Gornians with rocky gray skin and expressions like granite, positioned themselves by the door while Vextar examined her living space with obvious disdain. "Spartan accommodations," he observed. "But I suppose humans don't require much comfort." Sarah bit back her first 3 responses and settled for silence. "The hegemony delegation arrives in 12 hours, Vextar continued. Ambassador Kraltek is particularly interested in meeting you. He's never encountered a human before." "I'll do my best to represent my species honorably," Sarah managed. "Yes, you will." Vextar's tone carried unmistakable menace. "Because failure would be unfortunate for all of humanity's relationship with the Federation. You understand that Earth's membership is still provisional? That we could easily declare your species unfit for galactic society?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I understand." "Excellent. The ambassador will want to see examples of your work, of course. Your research findings, your contributions to Federation knowledge. I trust you have something impressive to show him?" The artifacts hidden under her bed seemed to burn with accusation. Sarah knew what Vextar wanted. He wanted her to hand over the Shatari technology so the Federation could add it to their military arsenal. But giving them those artifacts would mean betraying the last remnants of a peaceful civilization. "I have several interesting samples," she said carefully. "Interesting to whom, Dr. Chen? To military strategists? To weapons designers? Or just to academics who will publish papers that no one reads?" Sarah met his gaze directly. The value of knowledge shouldn't be measured only by its military applications. Vextar smiled, and it was like watching a predator bare its teeth. How refreshingly naive. "I remember when I shared such idealistic views about the purpose of science. Experience has a way of correcting such misconceptions." He moved closer, his silver skin reflecting the room's harsh lighting. "Let me be very clear about your situation, Dr. Chen. Tomorrow's evaluation will determine not just your future, but the future of human Federation relations. The ambassador expects to see proof that Earth species can contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. If you disappoint him..." The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt the walls of her quarters closing in, the weight of her isolation pressing down until she could barely breathe. "I won't disappoint him," she whispered. "I hope not. For all our sakes." After they left, Sarah sat on her bed and tried to stop her hands from shaking. 6 months of careful planning, of hidden research and desperate hope, had led to this moment. Tomorrow she would have to choose between betraying the Shatari or betraying her own species. Unless she could find a third option. Sarah pulled the artifact case out from under her bed and stared at the communication device. According to her translations, it was designed to send a signal across interstellar distances, reaching anyone who shared the Shatari's values. She had never activated it because she was afraid of what might answer, or worse, afraid that nothing would answer at all. But, if there was even a chance that someone out there might help, someone who understood what was at stake. Sarah picked up the device with trembling hands and activated its dormant systems. Ancient technology hummed to life, responding to her touch with an almost organic warmth. Symbols appeared in the air above the device, shifting and changing as it searched for compatible receivers. She had no way of knowing if her message would reach anyone, or if it would simply disappear into the vast emptiness between stars. But she had to try. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Human Archaeological Researcher stationed on Kepler 442b, she whispered into the device. "I am alone and running out of time. I have preserved artifacts from the Shatari civilization, but hostile forces want to use them for conquest rather than understanding. If anyone receives this message, if anyone still remembers what the Shatari stood for, I need help. Please." The device pulsed once with soft light, then fell silent. Sarah waited for several minutes, but there was no response. She was still alone, still trapped, still facing an impossible choice in a few hours. But somewhere in the darkness between stars, her message traveled at faster than light speed toward destinations she couldn't imagine, carrying the desperate hope of a species that had barely begun to understand the universe they had stumbled into. And, in the depths of space, something received that signal and began to move. The delegation from the hegemony of Zor arrived exactly at dawn, their ships descending from orbit like metallic vultures. Sarah watched from the observation deck as the imposing vessels settled onto the landing platforms with practiced precision. Even from a distance, she could see that these weren't ordinary diplomatic transports. The hulls gleamed with weapon arrays and shield generators, broadcasting a message of barely contained violence. Ambassador Kraltek emerged from the lead ship surrounded by an honor guard of 12 Zorian warriors. Sarah had read about the Zorians in her cultural briefings, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their reptilian scales shifting between deep purple and black depending on the light. Each warrior carried weapons that looked like they could level a building, and they moved with the fluid grace of apex predators. Sarah adjusted her clothing for the 100th time that morning. She had chosen her most formal outfit, a dark blue suit that had once been crisp and professional but now showed the wear of 6 months in harsh conditions. The NASA patch on her sleeve looked faded and pathetic next to the elaborate military decorations that adorned every other being she would meet today. "Dr. Chen, report to Conference Room Alpha immediately." Commander Vextar's voice crackled through her communicator with barely concealed tension. The arrival of the Zorian delegation had transformed the usually arrogant Vorthan into something approaching nervous energy. Sarah gathered her prepared materials and made her way through the station corridors. She had spent the night organizing her research files, carefully selecting items that would demonstrate human scientific capability without revealing the most sensitive Shatari discoveries. It was a delicate balance that might prove impossible to maintain. Conference Room Alpha was the station's largest meeting space, a sterile chamber with metallic walls and a holographic display system that could project images from across the galaxy. When Sarah arrived, she found the room already filled with Federation officials arranged in a careful hierarchy of species and rank. Commander Vextar stood at attention near the main display, his silver skin reflecting the harsh overhead lighting. The Zorian delegation occupied the far end of the room like a pocket of controlled chaos. Ambassador Kraltek sat at the center of the group, his massive form draped in ceremonial robes that couldn't quite hide the military hardware underneath. His eyes were golden and predatory, constantly moving as they catalogued everything in the room as either potential threat or resource. "Ah, Dr. Chen." Vextar gestured for her to approach. "Allow me to present our human researcher to the distinguished ambassador." Sarah stepped forward, acutely aware that every eye in the room was focused on her. She had practiced this moment dozens of times, but facing the reality of first contact with a species that could determine humanity's fate made her rehearsed words stick in her throat. Ambassador Kraltek studied her with obvious interest. When he spoke, his voice carried the rumbling undertone that marked his species' aggressive nature. "So this is what Earth produces. Smaller than I expected. More fragile looking. Humans are not physically impressive by galactic standards, Vexstar agreed quickly. But they have shown some aptitude for detailed research work. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. She had learned early in her stay that defending human dignity only made the insults worse. "Show me this research," Kraltek commanded. "I want to see what value Earth species might bring to the galactic community." Sarah activated the holographic display and began her presentation. She had prepared a carefully edited overview of her work on Kepler 442b, focusing on archaeological techniques and historical analysis rather than specific technological discoveries. The room filled with images of ancient ruins, artifact catalogs, and theoretical reconstructions of lost civilizations. For 20 minutes, she walked the assembled officials through months of painstaking work. She explained how human analytical methods could reveal patterns that other species might miss, how Earth's diverse scientific traditions brought unique perspectives to galactic archaeology. It was good work she was genuinely proud of, but she could see the growing impatience in Kraltek's golden eyes. "Interesting," the ambassador said when she finished. "But what practical applications does this knowledge serve? How does studying dead civilizations benefit the living?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "Understanding how societies rise and fall helps us avoid repeating their mistakes. These ancient civilizations developed technologies that could what?" Kraltek leaned forward, his predatory focus sharpening. "Could be weaponized? Could provide military advantages? Could help the Federation maintain its position of strength?" The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of air recyclers. Sarah realized she was standing at the exact moment she had dreaded, the point where she would have to choose between preserving the Shatari legacy and protecting humanity's future. "The civilizations I study were primarily peaceful," she said slowly. "Their technologies focused on sustainable development and long-term stability rather than conquest." Kraltek's expression shifted to one of obvious disappointment. "Peaceful civilizations. How quaint. And where are these peaceful species now, Dr. Chen?" "Extinct," Sarah admitted. "Extinct." Kraltek repeated the word with satisfaction. "Because peaceful species don't survive contact with stronger ones. Because cooperation is a luxury that only the powerful can afford." He stood up, his massive frame dominating the room. "This is what your research teaches us, that weakness leads to extinction." "That's not what I silence." Kraltek's voice carried absolute authority. "I have seen enough. Commander Vexstar, your human researcher has provided an adequate demonstration of Earth's intellectual capabilities. Adequate, but not exceptional." Sarah felt her heart sink. After 6 months of isolation and struggle, she had failed the only test that mattered. Humanity would be relegated to second-class status in galactic society, forever dependent on the goodwill of species that saw them as barely evolved animals. But Kraltek wasn't finished. However, adequate research is not what the hegemony requires from new Federation members. "We need to see evidence of practical loyalty. Proof that Earth species will serve galactic interests over their own narrow concerns." Vexstar stepped forward eagerly. "Dr. Chen has been most cooperative with Federation directives. She has consistently prioritized approved research objectives over personal preferences." "Has she?" Kraltek's gaze returned to Sarah with renewed intensity. "Dr. Chen, in your months of research on this world, have you discovered anything of immediate military value? Weapons technology, defensive systems, anything that could strengthen Federation capabilities?" Sarah felt the moment crystallize around her like freezing air. She could lie, claim her research had found nothing significant, and hope that somehow humanity would find another path to survival. Or she could reveal the Shatari artifacts and watch as their peaceful legacy was twisted into tools of conquest. She began, then stopped as the light suddenly flickered. Every head in the room turned toward the ceiling as the illumination cycled through a series of amber warnings before stabilizing. A moment later, the station's communication system crackled to life with an urgent message from the traffic control center. "All personnel be advised, unidentified ship approaching the station. Vessel is not responding to standard communication protocols." Through the conference room's viewport, Sarah could see a new star appearing in the system's purple sky. As she watched, the star grew brighter and resolved into the unmistakable shape of a spacecraft, but not one that matched any Federation design she had ever seen. The ship was sleek and angular, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It moved with a fluid grace that spoke of technology far more advanced than anything in the Federation fleet. As it approached the station, Sarah could make out details that made her breath catch in her throat. The hull was decorated with symbols that she recognized from her research, the flowing script of the Shatari language, etched in silver against the black metal. But these weren't ancient artifacts or archaeological remnants. This was a living ship, active and purposeful, carrying the heritage of a civilization that was supposed to be extinct. "What is that?" Kraltek demanded, his warrior instincts immediately recognizing a potential threat. Vexstar was already at his communication console, trying to raise the station's defense systems. "Unknown vessel, you are entering restricted Federation space. Identify yourself immediately or face hostile action." The response came not through normal communication channels, but through the station's emergency broadcast system, a direct override that bypassed all security protocols. When the voice spoke, it carried the calm authority of someone completely unimpressed by Federation threats. "This is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reed, United States Navy SEALs, representing Earth's Independent Archaeological Survey. I'm here to extract Dr. Sarah Chen and investigate reports of cultural preservation violations." Sarah's knees nearly buckled. The voice was human, unmistakably, impossibly human, speaking with the confidence of someone who had no doubt about their ability to enforce their words. Kraltek spun toward her, his golden eyes blazing with suspicion. "You sent a signal. You contacted this ship." Sarah found her voice despite her shock. "I don't know anything about an Earthship in this system. The last human vessel left months ago." "Unknown vessel, this is Federation Station Echo 7, Vexstar transmitted, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "You are in violation of multiple interstellar treaties. Withdraw immediately or face military response." The human voice responded with what Sarah could only describe as amusement. "Federation Station Echo 7, this is Lieutenant Commander Reed. I'm flying a ship that your sensors can't properly track, carrying weapons that your shields can't stop, and operating under authority that your politicians can't override. So here's what's going to happen: you're going to prepare Dr. Chen for immediate extraction, and you're going to provide full documentation of your archaeological operations on this world." Through the viewport, Sarah watched as the black ship settled into a hover pattern directly above the station's main landing platform. It shouldn't have been able to maintain that position, the energy requirements alone should have been impossible, but there it was, defying everything she knew about spacecraft engineering. "Impossible," Kraltek snarled. "Earth barely has interplanetary capability. They cannot have developed technology superior to the Federation." "Then, you might want to update your intelligence files," the voice of Marcus Reed replied calmly. "Because I'm looking at a station full of Federation military assets that pose approximately zero threat to my current position." Vexstar had gone pale, his silver skin taking on a sickly sheen. "Sir, our sensors are reading massive energy buildups in that vessel. Whatever propulsion system they're using, it's generating power levels comparable to a Federation battlecruiser." Sarah pressed her face to the viewport, trying to understand what she was seeing. The ship showed no visible engines, no exhaust ports, no obvious weapons arrays. It simply hung in space like a predator that had found its prey and was deciding when to strike. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message on a frequency that shouldn't have existed. When she opened it, she found a video transmission showing the interior of the mysterious ship's bridge. The man looking back at her was definitely human, but not like any human she had seen in months of alien company. He was tall and powerfully built, with short dark hair and eyes that carried the kind of calm intensity she associated with professional soldiers. He wore what appeared to be an advanced version of Earth military fatigues, but the equipment around him belonged in a science fiction movie. "Dr. Chen," Marcus Reed said, his image rock-steady despite the obvious impossibility of his position. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reed, and I'm here to bring you home. Are you injured or under immediate threat?" Sarah glanced around the conference room, where Federation officials were scrambling between panic and outrage. I'm not injured. But I don't understand how you're here. Earth doesn't have ships like yours." Marcus smiled, and it was the kind of expression that made Sarah remember why humans had once ruled their home planet through sheer determination rather than physical advantages. "Earth has been busy since you left, Doctor. We've had some help understanding what we were really dealing with out here." "Help?" Sarah felt her heart racing with possibilities she didn't dare believe. Your message reached some friends of the Shatari. Turns out they've been waiting a long time for a species that might be different from the usual galactic pattern. They've been very interested in meeting humans who share their values. Kraltek had been listening to this exchange with growing fury. Now he stepped forward, his massive frame radiating menace. Dr. Chen, you will terminate this communication immediately. This human vessel is clearly in violation of Federation law, and any cooperation with them constitutes treason. Sarah looked at the Zorian ambassador, then, at the Federation officials who had treated her like a barely tolerated pet for 6 months, then, back at the screen showing the first friendly human face she had seen since arriving in this system. With respect, Ambassador, I don't think you're in a position to make demands right now. The conference room erupted in angry voices as Federation officials realized that their careful balance of power was about to shift. But Sarah was no longer listening to them. Her attention was focused on Marcus Reed and the impossible ship that had somehow appeared exactly when she needed it most. Dr. Chen, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the chaos. I need you to gather any sensitive materials you don't want falling into Federation hands. You have approximately 10 minutes before I come down there to get you. 10 minutes? Vexstar sputtered. This station is defended by 40 Federation troops and automated defense systems. You cannot simply. His words were cut off as every screen in the conference room suddenly displayed the same image, the view from the mysterious ship's sensors, showing the station from above. But this wasn't a normal sensor reading. This display showed energy patterns, structural weaknesses, defensive positions, and the exact location of every living being on the station. 43 Federation personnel, Marcus's voice corrected calmly. Plus 16 civilian contractors and 1 very valuable human scientist. Your automated defenses are impressive by local standards, but I'd estimate about 30 seconds to neutralize them if you force me to take hostile action. Kraltek drew himself up to his full height, scales shifting to deep black with rage. Human, you dare threaten the hegemony of Zor? Ambassador, I'm not threatening anyone. I'm stating facts. Your ships can't catch mine, your weapons can't penetrate my shields, and your political authority means exactly nothing to the people I work for. Marcus paused, and, when he spoke again, his voice carried a note of genuine regret. I really hope we can resolve this without anyone getting hurt. But, make no mistake, Dr. Chen is leaving with me, one way or another. Sarah felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration as she watched the Federation officials realize that their assumptions about human capabilities were catastrophically wrong. For 6 months, she had been treated like a curiosity, a primitive specimen to be studied and controlled. Now, suddenly, the balance had shifted. I need to get my research materials, she said to Marcus. Understood. But, move fast, Doctor. I'm reading elevated stress levels throughout the station, and someone's going to do something stupid in the next few minutes. As Sarah headed for the door, Kraltek moved to block her path. You will not leave this room. You are Federation property, assigned to this station by treaty. Sarah looked up at the massive alien warrior, then smiled with more confidence than she felt. Ambassador, I don't think you understand. I was never Federation property. I'm a human citizen, under the protection of Earth's Independent Archaeological Survey. And, apparently, that protection just became a lot more effective than anyone expected. She stepped around Kraltek and walked toward the door, her heart pounding but her step steady. Behind her, she could hear the Federation officials arguing frantically about protocols and treaties and the impossibility of what was happening. But Sarah was no longer listening. For the first time in 6 months, she was going home. The only question was whether anyone would try to stop her. Sarah moved through the station corridors with purposeful speed, her mind racing as fast as her feet. Behind her, she could hear the growing chaos in the conference room as Federation officials tried to figure out how to respond to a situation none of their protocols had anticipated. The sound of raised voices and urgent communications followed her like an echo of the powerlessness she was finally leaving behind. Her quarters had never looked so small or temporary as they did now. Sarah grabbed her backpack and quickly stuffed it with the few personal belongings that mattered to her, photos from Earth, her grandfather's compass, the worn journal where she recorded her private thoughts about the expedition. But the real treasure was the case containing the Shatari artifacts, still hidden under her bed where she had left it the night before. As she reached for the case, her door chimed with an incoming visitor. Sarah froze, expecting to see Commander Vextar or Zorian soldiers on her display screen. Instead, she found Zara standing in the corridor, her translucent form flickering between blue and purple with obvious distress. "Sarah, what's happening? The entire station is in chaos. They're saying a human warship appeared from nowhere." Sarah opened the door and quickly ushered her friend inside. "It's not a warship. I don't really understand what it is. But someone came for me. Someone who can actually stand up to the Federation." Zara's form shifted to deep purple with concern. "This is dangerous, Sarah. If you leave with them, it will be seen as an act of rebellion. The Federation could use this as justification for harsh measures against Earth. And if I stay, I'll spend the rest of my life as a research slave, watching as everything I discover gets turned into weapons." Sarah pulled the artifact case out from under her bed and checked to make sure the contents were secure. "Zara, you've been kind to me, but you have to understand, I can't keep living like this." Through the walls, they could hear the station's emergency klaxons beginning to wail. The sound was accompanied by automated announcements warning all personnel to report to designated emergency stations. "They're going to try to stop you," Zara said quietly. Sarah shouldered her backpack and picked up the artifact case. "They're welcome to try." The corridor outside her quarters was filled with running figures as station personnel responded to the emergency protocols. Sarah joined the flow of movement, but instead of heading toward the designated shelter areas, she made her way toward the main landing platform where Marcus Reed had said he would meet her. She had barely made it halfway when a squad of Federation security troops appeared ahead of her, their weapons drawn and their attention focused on controlling corridor access. Sarah ducked into a side passage and tried to find an alternate route, but the station's layout worked against her. There were only so many ways to reach the landing platforms, and the Federation was systematically blocking them all. Her communicator crackled with an incoming transmission. "Dr. Chen, this is Lieutenant Commander Reed. I'm reading multiple security cordons between your position and the extraction point. Are you mobile?" Sarah pressed herself against the corridor wall as another security patrol passed by. "I'm moving, but they've got the main routes covered. I don't think I can reach the landing platform." "Copy that. Change of plans. I'm coming to you." Through the nearest viewport, Sarah watched as the mysterious black ship began to move. Instead of descending toward the landing platforms, it rotated and aligned itself with the station's residential section. A section of the hull opened to reveal what looked like a smaller craft, sleek and angular like its parent vessel, but sized for rapid insertion operations. The smaller ship detached smoothly and dropped toward the station with predatory grace. Sarah realized it was heading directly for the external docking port closest to her current location. Her communicator crackled again. "Dr. Chen, you need to get to docking port 7 in the next 3 minutes. Can you make it?" Sarah checked her position and calculated the distance. Docking port 7 was 2 levels down and 3 sections over, normally a 10-minute walk, but with Federation security teams actively hunting for her, it might as well be on another planet. "I'll make it," she said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. Sarah started moving, using her 6 months of station experience to navigate the maze of service corridors and maintenance tunnels that most personnel never saw. The emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red shadows, and the constant blare of alarms made it hard to hear approaching footsteps. She had almost reached the correct level when she heard voices ahead, Federation troops setting up a checkpoint at the main intersection. Sarah backtracked and found a maintenance shaft that led in the right direction. The space was barely wide enough for her to crawl through, but it bypassed the security cordon entirely. The shaft ended at a service panel that opened into a storage compartment near docking port 7. Sarah emerged covered in dust and grease, but she was only 50 meters from her destination. Through the viewport in the docking bay, she could see the sleek insertion craft settling into position with mechanical precision. "Dr. Chen, I'm at the port. Are you cleared to approach?" Sarah checked the corridor in both directions. Empty for the moment, but she could hear running footsteps and shouted orders getting closer. "I'm here, but Federation security is converging on this area." "Understood. I'm opening the airlock now." The docking port cycled through its connection sequence with surprising speed. When the inner door opened, Sarah found herself looking at a human face for the first time in 6 months. Marcus Reed was exactly as he had appeared on the communication screen, tall, powerfully built, with calm eyes that missed nothing. But seeing him in person made Sarah realize just how much she had missed human company. "Dr. Chen? I'm Commander Reed. Are you ready to go home?" Sarah stepped through the airlock, clutching her artifact case like a lifeline. More than ready. The interior of the insertion craft was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. The walls curved organically, giving the impression of being inside something grown rather than built. The control panels consisted of smooth surfaces that displayed information in three-dimensional holographic arrays. Everything spoke of technology so advanced that Sarah couldn't begin to guess how it worked. "Please take a seat and secure yourself," Marcus said, settling into what was obviously the pilot's position. "We're going to be leaving very quickly." Sarah had barely gotten her safety harness attached when the craft lurched into motion. Through the viewports, she watched the station fall away with startling speed. Within seconds, they were far enough away that the entire facility looked like a metallic toy floating in empty space. "How is this possible?" Sarah asked. 6 months ago, Earth barely had ships capable of reaching Mars. How did you get here so fast, and how do you have technology like this? Marcus smiled as he guided the craft back toward its parent ship. "That's a long story, Doctor. But the short version is that your message reached some very interested parties. The Shatari weren't the only peaceful species that got wiped out by galactic expansion. There are others who have been hiding in the dark spaces between stars, waiting for someone who might be different." Sarah felt her heart stop. "The Shatari aren't extinct?" "Not entirely. Small groups survived by going into deep hiding. They've been watching galactic civilization for thousands of years, looking for a species that might break the pattern of conquest and exploitation. When they intercepted your message, they decided it was time to make contact." The insertion craft slid smoothly into the bay of the larger ship, which Sarah could now see was even more impressive up close. The hull was covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow as she watched, like liquid metal that had been frozen in the moment of movement. "They helped us understand what humanity was really dealing with out here," Marcus continued. "The Federation, the hegemony, all the major galactic powers, they're just the latest version of the same pattern that's been repeating for millions of years. Strong species conquer weak ones, take what they want, and destroy the rest." Sarah thought about the ruins she had studied, the evidence of peaceful civilizations that had tried cooperation only to be crushed by those who chose conquest. "But why help us? What makes humanity different?" Marcus led her through corridors that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The architecture was unlike anything Sarah had seen, part organic curves, part geometric precision, as if multiple design philosophies had been merged into something entirely new. "According to our new allies, most species choose between being predators or prey when they encounter galactic civilization. They either embrace conquest or accept subjugation. But humans, we have a tendency to reject that choice entirely." They emerged onto what was obviously the ship's bridge, a circular chamber dominated by holographic displays that showed real-time information about everything from local space traffic to energy patterns throughout the star system. 3 other humans were working at various stations, their movements efficient and professional. "Dr. Chen," Marcus said formally, "welcome aboard the USAS Defiance, Earth's first deep space reconnaissance vessel." Sarah looked around the bridge in amazement. The technology was clearly beyond anything Earth could have developed independently, but the human touches were unmistakable. The crew wore modified versions of Earth military uniforms. Command protocols followed patterns she recognized from human naval tradition. This was definitely an Earth ship, even if the technology came from elsewhere. "How many ships like this do we have?" she asked. "Currently? 12, with more under construction. The Shatari and their allies have been very generous with technical assistance." Marcus gestured to one of the displays, which showed the Federation station they had just left. "But this mission isn't about showing off our new toys. It's about gathering intelligence on Federation operations and extracting any humans who want to come home." Sarah felt a surge of hope that she hadn't dared experience in months. "There are others? Other humans in Federation space?" 47 that we know of, scattered across different stations and facilities. Most of them think they're trapped, that they have no choice but to accept whatever treatment the Federation hands out. Marcus smiled grimly. "We're here to show them that's not true anymore. One of the other crew members, a woman with commander's stripes and intense green eyes, looked up from her station. "Sir, we're receiving multiple hail attempts from the Federation station. They're demanding that we return their research asset immediately." Marcus walked over to the communication station and activated the transmitter. When he spoke, his voice carried the casual confidence of someone who held all the cards in a poker game. "Federation Station Echo 7, this is the USAS Defiance. Dr. Chen is a voluntary passenger who has chosen to leave Federation custody. Under interstellar law, she has the right to refuse continued assignment to your facility." The response came in Commander Vextar's strained voice. "Lieutenant Commander Reed, Dr. Chen is bound by treaty obligations that supersede individual preferences. Her departure constitutes a violation of Federation Earth Accords. Commander Vextar, I have some bad news for you. Earth has withdrawn from those accords as of approximately 6 hours ago. Turns out that when our people learned what was really happening to their fellow humans in Federation space, they decided the treaty wasn't in their best interests." Sarah felt her knees go weak. "Earth withdrew from the Federation?" Marcus nodded. "Unanimous vote in the Global Assembly once they saw the evidence we've been gathering. Humanity is officially an independent species again, with full rights to extract our people from situations we consider exploitative." Through the bridge's viewports, Sarah could see Federation ships beginning to emerge from the station's docking bays. Small patrol craft at first, but she recognized the angular lines of military vessels preparing for action. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "Federation ships are moving to intercept positions. They're demanding we submit to boarding and inspection." Marcus studied the tactical display for a moment, then shook his head with what looked like genuine regret. "Signal all Federation vessels. Tell them this is their one chance to stand down. We don't want to fight, but we're not going to be intimidated either." Sarah watched as more Federation ships launched from the station, including several that she recognized as heavy cruisers with enough firepower to level a small city. The Defiance was impressive, but it was still just one ship against an entire Federation battle group. "Are you sure we can handle all of them?" she asked. Marcus activated a different display, and Sarah felt her understanding of the situation shift completely. The screen showed not just the local space around the station, but a much wider view of the star system. And, scattered throughout that system, previously invisible to Federation sensors, were dozens of ships that shared the Defiance's sleek design. "Dr. Chen," Marcus said calmly, "meet the first combined fleet of the Earth-Shatari Alliance. We didn't come here just to extract one researcher. We came here to announce that the galaxy has some new players, and we don't follow the old rules." Sarah stared at the display as the hidden fleet began to decloak, revealing a force that dwarfed everything the Federation had in the system. Ships of various sizes materialized like ghosts, becoming solid, their hulls gleaming with the same organic patterns she had seen on the Defiance. But the most impressive sight wasn't the fleet itself, it was what happened when they fully decloaked. Each ship began broadcasting the same message on every communication frequency in the system, in the languages of every species represented at the station. "This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell, commanding the first combined fleet. All Federation forces in this system are ordered to stand down immediately. This star system is now under Earth Alliance protection, and all archaeological sites are closed to military exploitation. Any Federation personnel who wish to leave may do so freely. Any Federation personnel who attempt hostile action will discover that humanity has some very capable new friends." Sarah felt tears she hadn't realized were forming begin to flow down her cheeks. For 6 months, she had been alone, powerless, watching as everything she cared about was destroyed or corrupted. Now, suddenly, she was part of something larger, something that might actually be able to stand up to the galactic powers that had seemed so unstoppable. "Commander Reed," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I have something you need to see. Something that might change everything." She opened her artifact case and carefully removed the Shatari communication device, its ancient surface gleaming with inner light. "This contains the complete historical records of the Shatari civilization. Everything they learned, everything they built, everything they dreamed of before the first galactic empire destroyed them." Marcus looked at the device with obvious recognition. "Dr. Chen, I think you're going to fit right in with our new mission profile. Because preserving that knowledge, sharing it with species who can appreciate it rather than exploit it, that's exactly why we're here." Through the bridge viewports, Sarah could see the Federation ships beginning to withdraw. Faced with overwhelming force and the reality that their assumptions about human capabilities were completely wrong, they were choosing discretion over valor. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. Marcus smiled, and it was the expression of someone who had found their true purpose. "Now we go home, Dr. Chen. We take you back to Earth, where your research will be appreciated for what it really is. And then, we come back out here to find the other humans who think they're trapped in Federation space. And, after that? After that, we start building something new. A galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest, knowledge instead of exploitation, hope instead of fear." He gestured to the fleet around them, ships from two species working together as equals. The Shatari spent 1,000,000 years believing that peace was possible between different species. They never gave up that hope, even when everything seemed lost. Sarah looked at the communication device in her hands, then, at the bridge full of humans who had traveled impossible distances to bring her home, then, at the fleet of ships that represented everything she had dreamed the galaxy might become. "Commander Reed," she said, "I think I'd like to be part of that." Outside the ship, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the struggles of the small beings who moved between them. But those small beings were no longer alone, no longer powerless, no longer willing to accept that might made right. The galaxy was about to discover that some species refused to choose between being predators or prey. And humanity was not alone in that refusal. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Alliance station orbiting Kepler 442b and watched as the last Federation mining operation packed up and departed. The red planet that had been her prison now sparkled with the lights of archaeological teams from a dozen different species, all working together to uncover and preserve the treasures that the Shatari had hidden across the world. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human practicality merged with Shatari elegance, creating spaces that were both functional and beautiful. Gardens grown with techniques that enhanced rather than depleted the soil. Energy systems that worked with natural forces instead of overwhelming them. Living quarters designed to support the psychological well-being of their occupants rather than simply cramming the maximum number of bodies into minimum space. "Quite a change from the last time you were here," Marcus Reed said, joining her at the viewport. He wore the uniform of the Alliance fleet now, with insignia that reflected both Earth traditions and something entirely new. The stars on his collar were arranged in patterns that honored both human naval history and Shatari concepts of cooperative leadership. Sarah nodded, watching as a transport shuttle departed the planet's surface carrying another group of Federation personnel who had chosen to leave rather than adapt to the new reality. "I keep expecting someone to tell me it's all a dream. 6 months ago, I was completely alone out here. Now you're heading up the largest archaeological preservation project in galactic history," Marcus finished. "Leading teams from 17 different species, with resources that most civilizations only dream about." It was true, though Sarah still had trouble believing it. The Shatari survivors had emerged from their hidden sanctuaries throughout the galaxy, bringing with them not just advanced technology but something far more valuable, proof that cooperation between species wasn't just possible, it was practical. Their methods of resource management, conflict resolution, and scientific advancement had sustained their hidden communities for thousands of years while the Federation's approach created constant crisis and competition. "Dr. Chen, incoming transmission from Earth," her assistant announced. The young man, David Park, a brilliant xenoarchaeologist who had volunteered for the Alliance's second wave of deep space missions, gestured toward the communication station. Sarah activated the holographic display and found herself looking at the familiar surroundings of the Global Assembly building in New Geneva. But the person addressing her wasn't a politician or diplomat. It was Dr. Elena Vasquez, her former department head, wearing a smile that Sarah hadn't seen in years. "Sarah, you look good. Rested. Happy." "I feel better than I have since we left Earth," Sarah admitted. "How are things back home?" Elena's expression grew more serious. "Complicated. The withdrawal from the Federation caused quite a stir, but the evidence you and the other extraction teams brought back has been eye-opening. The public is finally understanding what we were really dealing with out here." Through the display, Sarah could see other figures moving in the background of Elena's office, scientists, officials, and what looked like several beings she didn't recognize. "Are those Shatari refugees?" "Yes. We've been hosting delegations from the survivor communities, sharing research and comparing notes." Sarah, the things they've preserved, it's like having access to 1 million years of scientific advancement, but guided by principles of sustainability and cooperation instead of exploitation. Sarah felt a familiar surge of excitement. Are you considering joining the Alliance project? More than considering. The Global Assembly voted unanimously to commit Earth's resources to the preservation and study of pre-conquest civilizations. We're calling it the Heritage Initiative, and we want you to head up the Xenoarchaeological Division. Sarah looked around the observation deck, at the thriving research station, at the planet below where teams from across the galaxy were working to uncover and preserve the legacy of peaceful civilizations. 6 months ago, she had been one human researcher struggling to protect a few artifacts from military exploitation. Now she was being offered the chance to lead a galactic effort to preserve the heritage of countless lost worlds. Dr. Vasquez, I'm honored. But my work here isn't finished. There are hundreds of sites on Kepler 442b alone, and we're getting reports of similar preservation needs throughout Alliance space. Sarah, I'm not asking you to abandon your current work. I'm asking you to expand it. Earth wants to contribute to what you're building out there, not drag you back to old patterns. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Not the harsh klaxons of emergency, but the melodic tones that the Alliance used to signal important developments. Sarah looked around in confusion until David Park called her attention to the sensor displays. Dr. Chen, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple ships, big ones, approaching at high speed. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The Federation had accepted the loss of Kepler 442b with surprising grace, but there were other galactic powers that might not be so accommodating. The hegemony of Zor in particular had made angry noises about human presumption and Alliance expansion. Can you identify the ships? David worked frantically at his console, trying to pull useful information from the sensor readings. The energy signatures are strange. Not Federation standard, not hegemony either. The ships are huge, but they're moving faster than anything I've seen. Marcus was already moving toward the command center, his expression shifting to professional alertness. All stations, prepare for unknown contact. Shields up, but do not power weapons unless specifically ordered. Sarah followed him to the command center, where the main display showed the incoming ships as they decelerated from faster-than-light travel. There were 12 of them, each one larger than an Earth city, their hulls gleaming with patterns that seemed familiar but wrong somehow. Sir, the communication officer called out, we're receiving a transmission. Audio only, but it's on Alliance frequencies. Put it through. The voice that filled the command center was unmistakably human, but carried an accent that Sarah couldn't place and a formality that suggested military training. Alliance Station Kepler 442b, this is Captain James Morrison, commanding the Deep Survey Fleet. Requesting permission to approach and transfer personnel. Marcus looked at Sarah, confusion evident in his expression. Deep Survey Fleet? That's not one of ours. Sarah felt a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension as she studied the approaching ships. They were clearly built using advanced technology similar to what the Alliance had developed, but their design philosophy was different, more aggressive, more utilitarian. Captain Morrison, this is Commander Reed, Alliance Fleet. Please identify your point of origin and mission parameters. There was a pause before the response came, and, when it did, Sarah heard something in the captain's voice that made her blood run cold. Commander Reed, we represent the Colonial Liberation Front. Our mission is to extract human personnel from areas of alien occupation and return them to properly secured human space. The command center fell silent as the implications hit everyone at once. Sarah had heard rumors of radical human groups that rejected any cooperation with alien species, but she had assumed they were small fringe movements without real resources. Captain Morrison, all human personnel in this system are here voluntarily as part of a cooperative Alliance mission. No extraction is necessary. Commander, our intelligence indicates otherwise. We have evidence that Alliance personnel are being held under alien influence, possibly through advanced psychological manipulation. We are here to return you to proper human authority. Sarah moved to the communication station and activated the transmitter. Captain Morrison, this is Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Archaeological Operations for this station. I can assure you that no one here is under any form of alien influence. We are working as equal partners with Shatari survivors and other Alliance species. The response came quickly, and it carried a note of satisfaction that made Sarah's skin crawl. Dr. Chen, our records indicate that you were held prisoner by Federation forces for 6 months before your extraction. Psychological analysis suggests that your current cooperation with alien entities represents classic Stockholm Syndrome. We are here to provide proper rehabilitation. Marcus stepped forward, his expression grim. Captain, you are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. Alliance space is not subject to unilateral human intervention. Commander, the Colonial Liberation Front does not recognize alien authority over human citizens. Stand down your defenses and prepare for personnel transfer, or we will be forced to take more direct action. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the massive ships moving into formation around the station. They were taking positions that would allow them to cut off any escape routes while maintaining clear firing solutions on all Alliance vessels in the system. Sir, the tactical officer reported, I'm reading massive weapon signatures on those ships. Whatever they're carrying, it's designed to fight battles against entire fleets. Sarah felt a cold realization settling over her. The technology that the Shatari had shared with humanity hadn't gone only to the Alliance. Somehow, these Colonial Liberation Front ships had access to similar capabilities, but they were using them for exactly the kind of conquest and domination that the Alliance was trying to move away from. Dr. Chen, Marcus said quietly, we need options. Can you contact the Shatari directly? If they have ships in this system. Sarah was already activating the ancient communication device that had started this whole adventure 6 months earlier. The Shatari technology responded to her touch, reaching out across space toward the hidden sanctuaries where the survivors maintained their patient watch over galactic events. The response came within minutes, but it wasn't what Sarah had expected. Instead of the calm wisdom she associated with Shatari communications, the voice that answered carried notes of deep sadness and profound regret. Dr. Chen, this is Elder Kathmori. We have been monitoring the situation in your system. We must apologize. The technology we shared with your species has been accessed by those who do not share our values. How is that possible? I thought the Alliance was the only human organization with access to Shatari knowledge. We provided technological assistance to those humans who approached us with requests for help in preserving peaceful civilizations. We did not realize that some of your people would misrepresent their intentions in order to gain access to our capabilities. Sarah felt her heart sink as she understood what had happened. The Colonial Liberation Front had somehow discovered the Alliance's relationship with the Shatari, then approached the survivors with false claims about wanting to protect human archaeological teams. The Shatari, believing they were helping to preserve knowledge and protect peaceful researchers, had shared their technology with humans who intended to use it for conquest. Elder Kathmori, can you help us? These ships are threatening Alliance personnel and research sites throughout the system. The pause before the response was long enough that Sarah began to worry about the communication connection. When the Elder finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of difficult decisions. Dr. Chen, the Shatari have sworn never again to use our technology for violence, even in defense. We cannot directly intervene in conflicts between other species. But we can provide you with information that might help resolve this situation peacefully. A data packet began downloading to Sarah's console, containing detailed technical specifications and what looked like operational protocols. As she studied the information, her eyes widened with understanding. Marcus, look at this. The CLF ships are using modified Shatari technology, but they don't fully understand how it works. They've got massive power systems and advanced weapons, but their defensive capabilities are limited. More importantly, they're dependent on support infrastructure that they don't know how to replicate. Marcus studied the technical data with growing interest. Are you saying their ships are more vulnerable than they appear? I'm saying they're like someone who stole a race car but doesn't know how to change the oil. Impressive in the short term, but not sustainable. Before Marcus could respond, the communication system crackled with another transmission from Captain Morrison. Alliance vessels, you have 60 seconds to begin personnel transfer operations. After that, we will begin taking more direct action to secure human citizens. Sarah looked around the command center at the faces of her colleagues, humans who had chosen to work alongside alien species as equals, who had found meaning and purpose in preserving rather than conquering. Then, she looked at the sensor display showing the CLF ships in their threatening positions. Commander Reed, she said formally, I request permission to address Captain Morrison directly. Marcus nodded. Permission granted, Doctor. Sarah activated the general communication channel and took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had found their true purpose and wasn't going to let anyone take it away. Captain Morrison, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. 6 months ago, I was exactly where you think we are now, trapped, isolated, convinced that humanity had no choice but to accept subjugation to alien powers. I spent half a year believing that cooperation was just another word for surrender. She paused, looking around at the Alliance personnel who had become more than colleagues. They had become the family she had chosen when her species gave her the chance. But I was wrong, Captain. Not about the dangers we face out here, not about the species that see us as threats or resources to be exploited. I was wrong about what our choices really were. You see cooperation as weakness because you think survival requires dominance. But what I've learned is that true strength comes from building something better than what existed before. Dr. Chen, Morrison's voice carried a note of condescending sympathy. You've been isolated from proper human contact for months. Your perspective has been compromised by extended exposure to alien influences. We're here to help you remember what it means to be human. Sarah laughed, and it was the sound of someone who had found something worth fighting for. Captain, I remember exactly what it means to be human. It means refusing to accept that might makes right. It means choosing to build instead of destroy, to preserve instead of exploit, to cooperate instead of dominate. If you think those values make us weak, then you've forgotten what made humanity worth preserving in the first place. The communication channel fell silent for a long moment. When Morrison finally responded, his voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Dr. Chen, we have evidence that alien technology can influence human thought patterns. The fact that you believe you're making free choices doesn't mean you actually are. Captain Morrison, Sarah said gently, I want you to consider the possibility that you're the one who's been influenced. Not by alien technology, but by the same fear that's driven galactic civilization toward conquest and exploitation for millions of years. The fear that cooperation means weakness, that different means dangerous, that survival requires making others submit. She gestured toward the viewport, where the lights of the research station gleamed against the starfield. Look around you, Captain. Look at what we've built here. Humans and Shatori working as equals, preserving knowledge instead of weaponizing it, building something that makes the galaxy better instead of just making humanity stronger. Tell me that's not worth more than another empire built on fear and domination. The response came not from Morrison, but from a different voice, younger, carrying a note of doubt that suggested not everyone on the CLF ships was completely convinced of their mission. Dr. Chen, this is Lieutenant Sarah Kim, CLF Fleet Intelligence. Can you show us what you're talking about? Can you prove that what you've built here isn't just another form of alien control? Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded his permission. Lieutenant Kim, I'm transmitting a data package containing our research findings, our operational protocols, and personal logs from every human working on this station. Study it all you want. Talk to our people directly. See for yourself whether we're free agents or alien puppets. As the data transmission began, Sarah felt a strange sense of déjà vu. 6 months ago, she had been in almost exactly the same position as the CLF personnel, convinced that humanity's only choices were conquest or subjugation, unable to imagine a third alternative. And, Lieutenant? Sarah added. When you're done studying our files, ask yourself this: if alien influence could make humans more cooperative, more peaceful, more focused on preservation instead of destruction, would that necessarily be a bad thing? The CLF fleet held position for 3 hours while their personnel studied the transmitted data. Sarah spent the time coordinating with the Shatari survivors, making sure that anyone who wanted to leave the system could do so safely, while also preparing to defend the archaeological sites if diplomacy failed. When Captain Morrison's voice finally returned to the communication channels, it carried a note of reluctant respect that hadn't been there before. Dr. Chen, Commander Reed, CLF Command has reviewed your operational data. While we cannot accept alien involvement in human affairs, we acknowledge that your personnel appear to be acting under their own volition. Captain, Marcus responded carefully, does that mean you're willing to withdraw from the system? It means we're willing to negotiate. Some of our personnel have expressed interest in observing your operations firsthand. If you're willing to allow inspections and exchanges, we might be able to reach an accommodation. Sarah felt a surge of hope that surprised her with its intensity. The Colonial Liberation Front represented everything she had come to reject about human expansion into space, but they were still human. They were still her people, driven by the same fears and hopes that had motivated her own journey. Captain Morrison, any member of your fleet is welcome to visit our facilities and speak with our personnel. All we ask is that you approach with an open mind and a willingness to consider that maybe, just maybe, there's more than one way to be strong in a dangerous galaxy. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood on the same observation deck and watched as the first joint Human-CLF Alliance archaeological team prepared to depart for a newly discovered Shatari site in a distant star system. The ship that carried them was a marvel of cooperative engineering, CLF military efficiency merged with Alliance diplomatic protocols and Shatari sustainable technology. Think it will work? Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. Sarah watched the ship disappear into faster-than-light travel, carrying humans who had chosen cooperation over conquest, preservation over exploitation, hope over fear. I think, she said slowly, that the galaxy is about to discover something it hasn't seen in a million years. Which is? Sarah smiled, touching the Shatari communication device that hung from a chain around her neck. A species that refuses to choose between being predators or prey. A species that insists there's a third option, even when everyone tells them it's impossible. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent as always to the struggles of the small beings who moved between them. But those small beings were no longer alone, no longer powerless, no longer convinced that survival required the subjugation of others. The Shatari had waited a million years for someone to prove that cooperation was stronger than conquest. Humanity had stumbled into galactic civilization convinced they had to choose between dominance and submission. Together, they were building something that had never existed before, a galactic civilization based on the radical idea that different species could work together as equals, that knowledge was more valuable than weapons, that preservation was more important than profit. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, conflicts, species that refused to abandon the old patterns of exploitation and conquest. But, for the first time in galactic history, there was an alternative. And that, Sarah thought as she watched the stars, might just be enough to change everything. The message she had sent into the darkness 6 months ago had reached exactly the right people at exactly the right time. Now that message was spreading throughout the galaxy, carried by ships and people who believed that the universe could be better than it was. Left alone and broken, she had endured in silence until someone answered her call for help. Now she was part of something larger, something that might just save them all from the endless cycle of conquest and submission that had defined galactic civilization for millions of years. The stars were the same as they had always been. But the future spreading beneath them was full of possibilities that no one had dared imagine before.